centre of the swirling madness of London traffic, there is a sort of sanctuary, a green oasis which has intrigued, aroused the curiosity of thousands of Londoners and visitors alike. Not quite 40 acres, yet perhaps for many reasons more precious than any jewel in the crown. The Queen's Garden at Buckingham Palace. A minute or two before 9, a strange wailing note drones through the air. A custom started in 1843 by Queen Victoria. Each morning, when the monarch is in residence, a Scottish piper plays a traditional air beneath the Queen's window. The winter is almost past. Wildfowl glide across the lake, while smaller birds preen as if awakening to the first breath of spring. Alice in Wonderland birds, flamingos, exotic tropical birds 5,000 miles away from home. They tolerate the English winter and have learned to accept an assortment of unlikely neighbours. They too at last sense a welcome touch of warmth in the air. Mallards nest in daffodils, on the palace walls, sometimes in trees. To be born only yesterday, and today to make a giant leap into the world, is asking a lot of any one-day-old chick. But that is the demand of nature, for they must quickly find their way to water. High in the trees there are predators, the crows who watch and wait. On average, only 1 in 5 of the baby ducklings will survive. Somewhere beside the gracefully drooping bluebells, a bizarre courting ritual is taking place. A wolf spider flails its 2 palps, for all the world like boxing gloves, frantically signaling to a larger female, a prospective mate. But his advances are rejected. The courtship is a failure. Sadly, he bows out. Over the years, the policeman on patrol has learned to recognize many natural sounds. A startled bird becomes an early warning system, which tells him of any intruder in the palace grounds. This night it is a tawny owl, hunting. But the spring night is all too brief. Unsuccessful, perhaps, he stays on after the sun has risen. It soon becomes clear that he's trespassed into royal territory, and squatting is not allowed, especially by the blackbirds. He is mobbed and finally evicted. In front of the palace, there are all sorts of comings and goings. This has led to a strange life for a particular group of sparrows, who've made their homes in the crowns embellishing the main gates. Not only the sparrows, but their homes too, are always on the move. Their great and trusted friend is Ozzy, whose early life in Australia began on sailing ships. 30 years ago, he applied for the job of sweeping the pavements in front of the palace. He's happy. He's been doing it ever since. He hasn't much, but what he has, he gladly shares. More ducklings have hatched and taken to the water. But among those who've survived the crows, there's always one in the family who needs watching. Another frequent intruder in the garden is a tall grey heron, stealthily stalking, poised to stab a frog or a fish. Not successful, but enough to give this gudgeon a fright. Perch, with their dark vertical stripes, swim nearby. A female, about to lay her eggs, signals her condition to the male perch in a most unusual manner, by reversing the colours of her stripes. As she lays her eggs, the males cloud the water and fertilize them. The long streamer of some 30,000 eggs is wound into the weeds to anchor it. From then on, the parents take no further interest. The young perch will have to take their chance. Only a few will survive. Most will die shortly after hatching out. Some of the ducklings born in the comparative safety of the palace garden now instinctively decide they must go to the world outside, to the nearby St. James's Park, where their parents came from in the first place. But their return is a hazardous undertaking, even under the protective eye of the law. Not all are so lucky. Some aren't even born. It's all a matter of life and death, of warriors in combat, and the vanquished. Among the fallen, in a small hole in an upturned arm, a ruthless predator lies in wait. It is the home of the Segestia spider. He has carefully laid out a system of radiating threads, which, once touched, alerts the spider waiting in his parlor to the approach of an unsuspecting fly. It's almost 11 o'clock. Crowds and crowds of people outside are gathering for the changing of the guard, hoping perhaps to catch a fleeting glimpse of the Queen. But the Queen cannot always be on display, not all day and every day. More than anyone else, she too must have her moments of privacy. The spring flowers have come to an end. The garden must be brought to its zenith for the garden parties in July. The head gardener has his master plan for the herbaceous border, perhaps the Queen's favourite. Then, for the coming weeks of growth, the lazy days of summer. Beautiful though the royal roses are, to the greenflies and aphids all roses taste the same. Just as in any garden, these versatile insects continually multiply in their thousands. And worst of all, for the gardeners, within 10 days, the newborn aphids can start to reproduce all over again. However, the gardener does have some friends. The ladybird, that insatiable hunter. The delicate green lacewing. And the hoverfly larva, which sucks the aphids as greedily as the bee drinks nectar. But sometimes it's difficult to know who your real friends are. About 4 weeks before the garden parties, the invasion begins. Great skeletons of massive marquees start to creep across the lawn. After tea on the lawn, the invasion is over. The people have gone. Until next year. Whirligigs skate the surface of the lake, while the flamingos in their curious upside-down world continue to strain water backwards through their Roman noses in a constant search for food. The dragonfly, hovering with glistening precision above, is a rapacious airborne hunter, yet, strangely enough, it has already spent a good deal of its life below the surface of the lake. The dragonfly nymph possesses a strange hinged structure, a modified lower lip with powerful claws at the end for seizing prey, including its own kind, or sometimes an occasional fish. After 2 years or more beneath the surface of the lake, the time is ripe for change. Up it climbs. Once in the air, it gradually sheds its outer covering. At last, its stumpy wings fill out, and the metamorphosis is complete. It is ready to fly. A cobweb traps 1,000 crystal drops of water. A whole universe suspended on silk. Each droplet a tiny microscopic world. For some who have served in far-flung corners of the world and who've given much for king and country, there is a very special garden party. The party for the not forgotten. Now the summer's past, and autumn is almost here. Each year, in every garden, the passing seasons take their toll. There are casualties, those that die of natural causes or those that fall by accident or disease. This is the year of the Dutch elm disease. Incurable, it has destroyed 1 elm in every 4 in southern England, and the Queen's Garden is no exception. A twig, a cutting supposedly taken from a mulberry tree in Shakespeare's garden at Stratford-on-Avon and planted by James I over 3.5 centuries ago, is said to have been the start of the garden. And the many trees planted since then could stir the imagination of any historian privileged enough to wander through the grounds. In more recent years, fond memories of childhood are overshadowed by 2 young English oaks planted for Prince Charles and Princess Anne. What memories this garden must have had for so many princes, kings, and queens. Can roses in an English garden ever be forgotten?